Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I did this video on September 5th entitled DACA and the Fear of a Brown and Black America. And in response to that video, I received some criticism from several commenters, and I want to take out time right now to respond to these people. Now, one of the main comments that I received was this, telling African Americans to let them hold their own nuts, basically saying that immigrant groups should be responsible for addressing their own issues and that that's something that African Americans should not be concerned about. And when I hear this kind of rhetoric, the first thing I think about is this. A lot of these people are merely regurgitating, parroting, and repeating what they have heard people like Tariq Nasheed say. And a lot of times people will repeat slogans without using any kind of critical thinking about the impact of those particular slogans. And I think that that's just a reflection of ignorance. And also, even more importantly than that, is the fact that that slogan reflects hypocrisy because these same people demand justice from the criminal justice system. For instance, when African Americans are killed by the police, these same people complain about racism and white supremacy, and they do, whether they admit it or not. They want the larger society to be concerned about the plight of African Americans. But yet, these same people don't think that African Americans should be concerned about the plight of others. How can you realistically expect other people to care about you and be concerned about your issues when you don't care about anybody else's issues but your own issues? You can't move forward without coalitions. And that brings me to another point. A lot of these people kept saying, well, there are no coalitions between Black people and Latinos and other immigrant groups. And my response to that is simple. There are many examples of Latinos and Asians working in coalitions with African Americans around a wide range of issues. You can go back to the days of the Black Panther Party, for instance. They were in coalition with Latino groups like the Young Lords. All you have to do is look this history up. And the Black Panther Party is a model for what it means to be revolutionary, what it means to be really pro-Black, not this pseudo pro-Blackness that passes as consciousness here on YouTube. A lot of that pseudo pro-Blackness is nothing but ignorance and Black conservatism masquerading as some kind of pro-Black militancy when it's not. So that's the first thing. And then if you look into modern times, you will see many Latinos supporting Black Lives Matter, for instance. As you can see in this photograph right here, you have Latinos at various um, Black Lives Matter demonstrations, various protests against police brutality. This is commonplace. You have people like Rosa Clemente, an activist that is deeply involved in the Black and the Latino community in terms of advocacy for human and civil rights. And you have civil rights organizations that fight in coalition with other African American civil rights groups. For instance, you have groups like La Raza, you have groups like MALDEF, you also have groups like the Asian American Advocacy for Justice Center. All these groups that work in coalition, whether we're talking about fighting against police brutality or fighting to protect affirmative action. So you do have real coalitions between Black people and immigrant groups. And people who are actually involved in the movement, they understand this. This is not new information for people who are actually engaged in the struggle to affect change in society. Another argument that people kept raising in the comments section and elsewhere is this. They keep talking about how these immigrants are causing Black people to lose jobs. They talk about how because of immigrant groups, African Americans have a higher unemployment rate and all that kind of stuff. And some have even talked about the whole issue of lower wages being created because of this influx of immigrants who are willing to accept lower wages. Now, there's a study that is done, and I will post a link in the description box. The title of the study is Does Immigration, Particularly Increases in Latinos, Affect African American Wages, Unemployment, and Incarceration Rates? This study was done by Jack Strauss from the University of Denver. I again will include a link in the description box. This study points out how metropolitan statistical areas with more immigrants possess significantly higher African American median, mean, and per capita wages, meaning that African Americans earn more in cities and areas where you have an influx of immigrants. So that goes contrary to a lot of these talking points that the conservatives put out here and a lot of these ignorant people who are so-called pro-black put out here. Another thing is this: in these areas with large immigrant populations, you see a lower share of poor blacks and a higher share of middle and upper middle class African Americans in those areas, according to the study that I cited. And again, I encourage you all to read that study. It also points out how increases in immigration further contribute to lower black unemployment rates, particularly among young black men. That's what this study says. Again, that study is entitled Does Immigration, Particularly Increases in Latinos, Affect African American Wages, Unemployment, and Incarceration? And that study, again, is by Jack Strauss of the University of Denver. Also, the Washington Post pointed out how experts say that there are other reasons why there are problems with unemployment in the black community. A lot of the problems deal with, some African Americans being caught up in the street life and, getting imprisoned, and the stigma that goes along with being an ex-offender. When someone has committed crimes and they have been convicted, it is more difficult for them to find job opportunities. So I encourage you all to read that report that breaks down some of these myths that people are promoting out here. Now I'm going to further respond to some of the comments that I received to this video, so just bear with me a second. Some of the things that I've already pointed out. Now this person right here, this brother by the name of Black Men Taking Our Community Back, he says DACA does not help black folks. Now, if by black folks he is talking about African Americans, yeah, I mean, obviously we are citizens in this country. We don't need DACA in order to benefit for our, to benefit our community because we are already citizens. But if he's talking about black folks in a larger sense, meaning people who are immigrants to this country, who are African or who are black, then he's clearly wrong. He's clearly mistaken because Haitian immigrants benefit from this. Immigrants from other parts of the Caribbean benefit from this. Immigrants from Africa, from different parts of the African diaspora, they benefit from DACA. So for him to say it doesn't help black folks, that's just straight up wrong if he's talking about black folks in the larger sense beyond just the African American community. Now, someone left a rather long comment, and I want to just take some time to respond to some of the things that this woman said. I already addressed her argument about like immigrants taking away jobs from black youth. There's nothing to back that up. There's no clear study that I'm aware of that has proven that that's the case. And then this person goes on to talk about affirmative action, how it does more for women and Latinos than it does for black people. I mean, Obviously, affirmative action benefits other groups besides African Americans, but you cannot deny the fact that African Americans greatly benefit from affirmative action. We do, we simply do, because a lot of us would not get an opportunity to go to college or to become doctors, lawyers, or other types of professionals if it wasn't for affirmative action, allowing African Americans to get in the door of the university to get a higher education. So the fact that other people benefit from it is really irrelevant. The fact of the matter is African Americans greatly benefit from affirmative action. And because of affirmative action, you have a much larger black middle class than you had before affirmative action. So I just think that that's really a weak point to make, to bring up this fact that other people benefit from it or even benefit from it more. I mean, would in a perfect world, I prefer that affirmative action be targeted towards African Americans to remedy the issue of past discrimination? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that affirmative action should be as broad as it is. I think that it should have been more focused on addressing the problem of past discrimination, but courts have ruled against that. Courts have made it so that affirmative action has to deal with diversity instead of merely just focusing on past discrimination and remedying that problem. So even in that case, African Americans still benefit from affirmative action. And to throw out affirmative action or to dismiss it is like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Now I talked about like how, we expect, this person said DACA should not be a concern for African Americans. As a black man, we should be concerned about the black agenda. Obviously, we should be concerned about a black agenda. And one of the ways of promoting a black agenda is getting into coalitions with others who share common interests in order to promote that agenda. In order to get an agenda passed in Congress or to get laws passed on the state level, you need to have lobbying efforts done, you need to have voters done, and the more numbers that you have behind your initiative, the more likely it is to pass or to actually become law and to change the situation. That's just a fact of politics. And it's only intelligent for people to work together in order to promote common interests. So DACA is something that affects primarily immigrants, obviously, but that's no reason for us to say, well, we shouldn't be concerned with it or we shouldn't partner with those in exchange for them partnering with us on issues that matter to us and on issues where we both share a common interest. I mean, all kinds of different groups benefit from affirmative action. So it's in their interest to work together to fight to preserve affirmative action, for example. And if we stand behind these groups when they are fighting for DACA, then we should negotiate and make sure that they stand behind us when we're fighting for equal opportunities in education, when we're fighting to end police brutality. And those people who are actually involved in the movement understand this. They do it every day. They work with all these different civil rights organizations, whether they're Latino civil rights organizations or Asian organizations. They work together because they understand that it's only together that you can affect real change. Now let me go through some more of the comments that this person left. Now again, this person says they do not support black issues. That's just wrong. I mean, that's one of these ignorant statements that a lot of these people promote. Because again, there are example after example of Latinos and Asians participating in Black Lives Matter demonstrations, examples of them working in coalitions with African Americans. So I'm not the one that needs to wake up. These people that are perpetuating this ignorance on YouTube, they're the ones that need to wake up to the fact that we need to work with other groups of people if we want to affect change in the society. Now, I'm not saying, first of all, I'm not saying that there are no racist people in these groups, these different immigrant groups. You know, obviously there are people who are racist that are Asian. There are people who are racist that are Latino. We understand that racism and colorism is an issue that exists in the Latino community. I'm not denying that at all. I'm just saying that there is no reason why we shouldn't work with those who are like minded, with those who have some kind of understanding and awareness, who are involved in the social justice movement. Let me see if there's anything else that I want to respond to before I go. Just bear with me a second. And I won't repeat some of these comments because they have already been addressed in my commentary. And then this is a side note, but you have all these ignorant people here on YouTube that promote this idea that African Americans are not African Americans, that we're Aboriginal Americans or Native Americans. And I mean, that stuff is just nonsense. I mean, I did a long video in response to something that Conspiracy Dude posted. Um, I may include a link in the description box or on the card so that people can see that. But I mean, it's well documented. You know, they had records of the slave ships that went from Africa to America that are on logs. There have been slave ships recovered. The history is just enormous. I mean, you have slave narratives that document the fact that we came from Africa. So, I mean, I just really think that, that YouTube and the social media has allowed ignorance to be promulgated, has allowed the most outlandish and ridiculous ideas to have an audience, ideas that would be laughed at in a college or university, ideas that have no basis in any kind of actual facts. Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. Tell me what y'all think. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.